Well, good morning, everyone. Clerk tells me we have quorum, and it's past the hour 9:30, so I'll call the meeting to order. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. Other individuals and the media may also be audibly or visually recording this meeting. All electronic devices are to be switched to the non-audible function during committee meetings. Madam Clerk, any changes to the agenda?
Yes, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, there are changes. Revised discussion items. Item 10.1, Bill 65, the neighborhood speed limit reduction implementation, was deferred from the June 17th meeting. Appendix C has been added to that report and is on yellow before you. Item 10.2, the Mountain Climber Phase 2 pilot project results and Phase 3 expansion. Recommendation D has been revised, so the report results go back to the Public Works Committee rather than Council. Revised recommendation, item 10.3 to incorporate city lands into Acadia Drive. Recommendation B has also been revised. It should read, let's see here. It was attached as Appendix B to the report, not Appendix A. There's a revised recommendation to show that. Item 10.5, which is the telecommunications industry investments in the city, report PW 19062 LS 19029, has been withdrawn from today's agenda and will be brought forward to a future Public Works meeting. Item 10.6, Smart Commute Workplace Mobility Program Transition. Recommendation C has been revised, so the report comes back to the Public Works Committee rather than Council. And revised motions, 11.6, the installation of Type B pedestrian crossover on Cannon Street East, 40 kilometers an hour zone speed limit with flashing beacons on King Street East for Bernie Custis Secondary School, on Main Street East for Memorial School, and on King Street East and Main Street East for St. Patrick's Catholic Elementary School. As well, funding for various public infrastructure initiatives in Ward 3, and an added notice of motion, the installation of ladder-style crosswalks at the intersection of Rosemount Avenue and Barnsdale, Ward 3. And there's also a presentation that's been added for the delegation for item 8.2, and that's in your package as well.
And I believe, Madam Clerk, staff wanted to pull 10.5 at this time too, didn't they? I did. You mentioned that, did you? Okay. Motion to approve the agenda, Councillor Pearson, second by Councillor Vanderbeek, all in favor. Oh, details. Is there, that carries. Is there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, we'll move on to I need a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes of the June 17th meeting. Moved by Councillor Farr, seconded by Councillor Nan. All in favor? And 6.1, that carries. 6.1 is I need a mover and a seconder to approve the delegation of David Orsolino for a future meeting regarding traffic data used to make modifications on Aberdeen Avenue. Moved by Vanderbeek, seconded by Pearson. All in favor? And that's carried, yes. We need electronic vote on that, Madam Clerk? Yes, please. And then 7.1 on the consent items is the Waste Management Advisory Committee minutes. Are there any questions respecting 7.1? Councillor Pearson. Moving it, seconded by Councillor Danko. Need an electronic vote on this because there's action items. All in favor? (7.2) Intersect Control Wards 1 to 3, 8, 13, and 14. Are there any questions regarding 7.2? Moved by Jackson, seconded by Collins. All in favor? In-house, item 7.3 is the in-house bid submission for the operations and maintenance of the central composting facility. Are there any questions regarding 7.3? If not, mover and seconder to receive. Yes, Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So through you is Director Murdoch's here. Wonderful. So I think this was led by, if you will, Councillor Marula, who suggested after lots of the difficulties we've had with the composting plant, current provider, service provider, that let's look at the opportunities for an in-house bid. So if I'm interpreting correctly, Craig, this is saying that an in-house bid will be allowed with certain conditions. Mr. Chairman, through you, please.
Craig?
Through the chair, that is correct, Councillor. The in-house bid has already been approved by committee and council, but because this was brought forward as a motion rather than a council report by staff, we were required to come back and identify the members of the in-house bid, and that's what this information report is doing. We're identifying the members and identifying that we're in the process of obtaining a fairness monitor and meeting the conditions of policy 22 of the procurement policies.
That's great, Craig. I've, over my years, both pre and post amalgamation, Mr. Chairman, I have always found it very fascinating when there have been previous in-house bids versus private sector bids, to compare the two, the pros, the cons, the upside, downside, the cost advantages, disadvantages, community intangible benefits or not. So I think this is going to be a fascinating process. And as you know, currently with garbage collection, we both have our local union collecting half the city and the private provider collecting the other half. So I'm really, I think this will benefit us overall down the road. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I see no other speakers. You want to move it, Councillor Jackson? Seconded by Councillor Pauls. All in favor? Yes, item 7.4 is the annual report on water main breaks. Is there any questions regarding it? Councillor Farr.
Just a quick one. You know, seeing that ground movement is costing us quite something, and you know, I perused, I think, Appendix C or B, C. Anyway, you know, it was over 100,000 or 175 on some street. I think it was, it might have been Ward 8, it might have been your ward, Grimel it was, I believe, and then there was 100,000 on Upper Ottawa for one water main break. I don't know all the details, but that really adds to this annual bill, obviously. I'm just curious, has this committee, being fairly new to the committee, ever contemplated putting ward breakdowns on these costs? And, you know, there's older parts of the city where we have lots of water main breaks. I was quite fascinated to see it's not exclusive to the older parts of the city. We are all getting these breaks, quite obviously, and some of them are quite costly, and the costly ones appear to be in the burbs. So have we ever looked at, through you to staff, breaking it down by ward?
Ward, are you going to take that?
Through the chair, Councillor, all of the break history would be easy to pull apart by ward and by year. So if there's a desire for a specific format, we can provide that.
Councillor? I was sensing maybe you want to volunteer that you would charge that to your air rating accounts in wards 1 through 8. Is that the reason you want it? Okay. Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 7 of 8, there's a chart of infrastructure reinvestment rate comparison, and I believe the only one that we are meeting the investments is the horizontal water infrastructure. Just could staff give an overview of this chart maybe, and some of the reasons that we're not investing as much as is recommended?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, you are correct. This is a similar chart that you would have seen in the 2019 rate budget presentation that we presented in December, indicating that we are currently underinvesting in most of our categories. There has been a big push for water over the last number of years, and I would attribute that to in part to a coordinated roads program. So when we're out there doing work, we want to ensure we're not going back in the near future. So we may accelerate some water main projects to align with some of the other work in the corridor. That does have a detrimental effect to some of our other infrastructure. And I pointed out in my budget presentation that those vertical classes of infrastructure, so our pumping stations and our reservoirs, those are where we do have the biggest risks. So it is important for us to reevaluate that, and I think it kind of leans back to the asset management policy that Gore brought forward. We need to be sure we're investing in the right infrastructure moving forward.
And then the paragraph following there, is that applicable funding requirements will be analyzed and calibrated to Hamilton's needs through the asset management plan, which is in 2021. So are we anticipating that there might be some significant rate changes as a result of that asset management plan?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, I think that is still yet to be determined. I think this does somewhat link to the conversation we had at GIC earlier this week about stormwater rates, and we're investing in the proper infrastructure. With a combined rate right now, it's hard to determine what is being, or things are moved around, maybe without the visibility that we would require. So they're potentially, but nothing right now is screaming that we're going to see significant changes.
Okay, and then just interestingly, on the stormwater side, notice they're recommending 1% and 2% investments, and our investment seems to be around the 0%. So it's an interesting conversation that happened to just be at GIC this week about the stormwater rate program. Okay, thank you.
Sir Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I've always appreciated very much Director McGuire and Director Grice from the two departments and their collaborative work, and they're insisting on more collaboration between engineering services and Hamilton Water Services. And the point I'm getting at is, Mr. Chairman, that often when we have roads up for reconstruction or even asset renewal, if the two departments are consulting and talking to each other to ensure that a road doesn't get reconstructed for millions of dollars, and then months later, a year later, there's a serious water main break. So, Mr. Chairman, through you to Gord and/or Andrew, maybe just a quick cursory on how the two departments try to do their best to coordinate projects moving forward so that that type of scenario I described hopefully doesn't happen. Through you, Mr. Chairman, please.
So through the chair, Councillor Jackson, we have a project coordination protocol and process. Our large roadworks go through a cycle where we try very hard to coordinate with all of the underground infrastructure, including the utilities, including the water and wastewater assets. We reach out to all of the groups. We have functional plans and reviews, and we go through the break histories and everything else like that to ensure that we're not doing work and then coming back and redoing it.
Okay. And Gord and Andrew, and for my colleagues' edification, you know one area, and you both have been diligent and always available in the Upper Gage Fennel area, Mr. Chairman, and I'm just trying to make a point here. I think over the last 5 or 6 years, there's been at least 3 or 4 serious water main breaks in the vicinity of the Upper Gage Fennel area. My point being, and both roads have gone through some asset renewal in the last 2 or 3 years as well. Can maybe Gord or Andrew answer my comment and my question being, at what point, what's the threshold, at what point you go, you know what, 4 water main breaks after 5 years, that's enough. We've got to seriously replace the main line and the sewer in that area because we're creating more cost to the taxpayers by not being more proactive. So maybe again, a comment from either one of them, Mr. Chairman, in an example like that.
Through the chair, Councillor, we work through a water main management framework, and we have a criticality model around the size of the main, a variety of other things around it. As the main's performance changes over time, we manage the break history, then it elevates in our cycle for capital renewal. You've seen in your area some water main breaks. Unfortunately, they're kind of on different segments. I think we had that conversation, and what you end up with is a road that has a number of breaks, but they're not necessarily hitting our threshold. At this point in time, we're going to come back with an asset management plan that talks about levels of service, reinvestment rates, and we'll reevaluate that water main management framework at that time.
That raises my comfort level, and I think with the leadership and engineering services and Hamilton Water, I think this is one that hopefully enough of us have brought to their attention that they're doing whatever more proactively they can. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I suspect, Gord, that one of the main reasons we did Lock Street this year, full reconstruction, was because of the water main was in deplorable shape over there. And
Yeah, that's correct, Councillor.
yes, Dan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Maybe just, hopefully I'm not putting too fine a point on this, but just wanted to clarify. So when it comes to coordinated works within the road allowance That's Gord. Gord controls all of that, whether it's water, sewer, road, sidewalk. He controls all of that. So he does that on behalf of Hamilton Water. When it comes to asset management, Hamilton Water only looks after the facilities that are outside the road allowance, for example, pump stations, treatment plants, and those types of things. So any of the prioritization of work within the road allowance, Gord does that on behalf of Hamilton Water. So I know over the years there's been a bit of confusion about who makes those decisions, but that rests entirely with engineering services. They do it on behalf of Hamilton Water as well as other parts of Public Works. And there's no question there is collaboration, but when it comes down to the prioritization and the actual development of the capital budget for coordinated works within the road allowance, that rests solely with Gord's group.
Thank you for that clarity, General Manager. Okay, so can I have a mover or seconder to receive 7.4? You're back to re-volunteering again to pay for it from your ward budgets?
How do we get 175,000 or 100,000 water main break? Is that like an earthquake? What happened in those two cases? They really stood out to me, so I'm just curious. It's not defined in the report.
Andrew, you gonna take that?
Thousands times the average.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, again, going back to what we presented in our rate budget presentation, depending on the size of the pipe and the magnitude of the damage that it causes. So I think back to the water main break that we had outside the water treatment plant last year, that caused significant damage to all the surrounding areas. By the time you complete all that restoration, it can be quite costly. Other events that are within the road allowance, it is the restoration cost that can often drive the cost. If we are paving a large stretch, that certainly adds up very quickly.
So safe to assume on Rymal West, which was 175, on Upper Ottawa, which was 100, there was a large restoration bill attached to a water main break.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, can mover to seconder then to receive it. Moved by Farr, seconded by Jackson. All in favor? Carried. 7.5 is elevated lake levels and derating of the peak flow capacity of the Woodward Avenue wastewater treatment plant. Any questions? If not, I need a mover and a seconder to receive it. Moved by Collins, seconded by? Oh, yeah. Okay, moved by Collins, seconded by Jackson. Councillor Collins, you have the floor.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank staff for the update here. And as it's noted in the report, there is another subsequent report that will be presented to committee and council later this year that deals with how we address on a short and medium and long-term basis the flooding that we've experienced, not just around the lake, but around the bay as well. And I didn't want to let this opportunity pass without giving thanks, obviously, both to Dan and Andrew, but in particular, I've been specifically dealing, and my residents have been dealing in 2017 and this year, where the 2019 levels on Lake Ontario surpassed 2017. Dave Alberton and Don Young have done tremendous work in the beach neighborhood. Almost, within an hour or two after calling, and Lucy and I have probably received dozens of calls this year, less than 217, because I think we have a game plan from an operational perspective that better deals with some of the challenges with rising lake levels in the beach community. But within a couple of hours, for each and every email or call, Dave and or Don have responded to my residents. And I have received really the Cadillac service from these two gentlemen and other staff as well, senior staff. But I didn't want to let today's information report pass without thanking them both for the service that they've provided to my office and to my constituents. I will have tomorrow, I think, at Finance, a motion added, because we're finally seeing, as the report suggests, the lake levels are coming down this month and next, and that's all, of course, predicated on the fact that there's a normal rain pattern. I will have a motion that seeks to invoke the Municipal Relief Assistance Program for basement flooding, as has been referenced here. My beach community was hit again in 2019. It's not just our municipal infrastructure that's been impacted, but certainly, and there was some very good media attention in the Spectator, CHML, and on CBC in terms of how individual residents have been impacted by these events. And so I will have that motion in front of committee tomorrow. I hope they'll see some support again, as we did in 2017. But looking forward to the report that's referenced here. Wanted to thank Dave and Don for their efforts, and I appreciate the fact that staff continue to give us updates with the challenges that we face. Sorry, I did have one question. That was the climate change reserve that I had brought up last year. I don't know what the status is of that, and I think the issue that's in front of us here would appropriately deal with whatever expenditures need to come as it relates to making operational changes or capital investments, whether it's on the beach or elsewhere, where we've seen some issues with the escarpment changes and things like that. So can I ask through you to staff what the status is of that, of the climate change reserve? There was a motion put last year seeking to
And do you want
establish
to
one.
take that? I just wonder whether that's an AF&A question, but
I thought Public Works would be intricately involved with any discussion that might
Dan?
involve that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any of that information with me, but certainly happy to follow up.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And thank you for recognizing those two individuals. I know Dave Albert and I have the same exceptional service from him. He seems to do an amazing job. Okay, so I guess you're moving the report be received. Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Jackson. All in favor? Let's go on to 8.1. I'd like to call upon David Twist to delegate respecting the paving of Balsam Avenue South from Cannon Street East to Main Street East and general sidewalk repairs. So David, if you're in the audience, there you are. David, the podium is yours, and you have 5 minutes for your presentation.
Good morning, members of the Public Works Committee. My name is David Twist. I live at 76 Balsam South. I'm speaking on behalf of Balsam Avenue residents. On 2016 to 2017, from Main and Sherman's east, including Dunsmuir, were paved, including Leinster Avenue, where all the construction stopped. And the paving crews left on June 2017 and never returned. Former Councilman Green's office said as soon as the new high school was completed, Balsam Avenue would be completed. Bike lanes were installed on Gage Avenue, 2018. Cannon Street, Sherman to James, paving and bike lanes began May of 2019. June, 2019 city crews put 3 Band-Aid patches on Balsam Avenue between King and Cannon. We have very large trucks using Balsam Avenue instead of Gage Avenue. We've already had a cave-in in Balsam due to these large trucks. I have some pictures here that were taken along that's Balsam Avenue there right now. The streets on here. This is Balsam Avenue right near Dunsmuir at the corner here. This is like this all the way down. This is Balsam Avenue right beside the Burning Center. And as you can see, the 3 patch marks are on that they just made there just 2 or 3 weeks ago. Not very nice looking when you have a beautiful building like that. Cannon Street all looks nice. When I left my house this morning, Mr. Councilman, at about 20 or 30 Balsam Avenue South, they started digging and taking up 5 or 6 slabs of the sidewalk on Balsam Avenue because one piece of ash or concrete was knocked out by a truck about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I've got asphalt in front of my driveway that's been there for 6 years. And it's never been, the sidewalk there has never been repaired. All of a sudden now we get a little dent in the road and it's not right.
Have you contacted your ward councillor?
No, I never, because Councilman Green's office before was supposed to have all this done when they stopped at Leinster Avenue Everybody left. And there was nothing done after that. And I called, there must have been 50 times different people, including myself, called to find out when our street was going to be done. But there was nothing. They never touched Canad Avenue either. And believe me, it's for a nice building and everything on the street, and you got a Grey Cup coming. This looks terrible. But yet they've done all these other streets, Fairholt and everything, right down, including King Street, but they can't do our street.
Okay, are you finished now?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so you're very capably represented by Councillor Nan now, and we do have a 10-year capital program, and it can be looked up where the street is. But I'll open it up to any questions, and I don't, Councillor Nan, go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you through the chair. Thank you, David, for coming in this morning. I can appreciate how frustrating it must feel as residents who are seeing so much other investment going into the neighborhood and then seeing a beautiful new facility come in and still seeing the frustrating situation with your roads. I was wondering if you received our communication from June. We sent an email to you. We picked up the file in the transition coming into the office and had a chance to email you with an update from staff. Were you able to read that email?
My wife has email, but I don't have a computer.
Okay, so if you don't mind, I can connect with you offline and get your correct contact information. We tried calling the number that was on the in the file as well, and the phone number wasn't in service, so I'd be happy to work with you. Thank you.
So just contact Councillor Nan when you can, then 546 City, and they'll put you right through to her.
Okay, thank you very much, and I appreciate your time.
A motion to receive the presentation, moved by Councillor Nan, seconded by Councillor Fire. All in favor? As carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on now to 8.2, which is Jay Kraus, Cycle Hamilton, respecting the Cannon Street resurfacing project. So I'd like to call on Jay to go down to the podium. So welcome, Jay. I just to let you know also that we have a 5-minute time limit on your presentation. So the podium is yours.
Thank you. So thanks so much for having me in today. My name is Jay Kraus. I'm a Beasley resident and the incoming co-chair of Cycle Hamilton. So what I'm here to talk about today is the ongoing project regarding the Cannon Street resurfacing project, and with that, the implementation of the permanent cycling infrastructure. So really quickly, I just want to go through a little bit of the background of the project, go through where we are today, and then also address the policy context surrounding the project, and then our recommendations and step forward. So I think it's really important when we're having this discussion to look back at how this project actually started. The Cannon Street Cycle Track came from a very successful grassroots campaign in 2013 called Yes We Cannon. And so I think that acknowledging that community-led widespread engagement is the foundation of this project. It's very important in how we consider how we've gotten here and how we continue to move forward. Beyond that, I also want to acknowledge that the Cannon Street Cycle Track has become an essential piece of infrastructure in our city, especially for those who choose to bike. In 2018, from May to August, there were approximately 75,000 trips, which is over 600 trips every single day in usage. And it is, as of today, the only protected, safe east-west route for people biking in our city. So really, the point here is I'm just trying to get across is that it's a well-established, well-used, and essential route for people who are biking in our city. So I'm here essentially to address 3 primary concerns regarding how we've gotten to the resurfacing project. First was the lack of notice, which is the baseline of the City of Hamilton's Charter of Public Engagement. There was a letter sent out and received by residents along Cannon on April 10th, and then a formal public announcement and the launching of a website on May 10th, just 3 days on a Friday before the launch of this project, which effectively prohibited any initiative from the public or from different community-based organizations to share their thoughts, feedback, or recommendations as it was already tendered before either of those communications came out. The second, moving beyond the just pure lack of notice, is the lack of consultation. With these large projects that we see affecting thousands of people and their transportation, it is essential that we have input into best practices, into how it's going to impact these communities in the design and before the tendering of the process. And finally is just the prioritization. So we love seeing the strong media campaign, both online and physical, of the Red Hill Valley Parkway. And we just feel, personally and the cycling community, that the same level of prioritization was not given to this project. And that was seen throughout a couple different steps. So really quickly running through the policy context, the Ontario Track Manual Book 7 regarding accommodations outlines that we need to prioritize maintaining cycling committees, we need to provide early notice and utilize community groups. Specific detours should only be acceptable when it is safer and more convenient, and when conditions cannot be made acceptable. And when there are detours, we need to provide clear guidance to people who should use them. And second, specific to the City of Hamilton, within the temporary conditions, bike lanes, and cycle track document, it very clearly outlines that every effort needs to be made to maintain facilities, and when that's not possible, we need to either share the road and have that be clearly communicated, or relocate the infrastructure to provide an acceptable alternate route. So really, where does this lead us today? The impact of this process is not in line with Council's clearly demonstrated vision and goal of increasing cycling in Hamilton. It's not in line with the Vision Zero commitment, and it's not in line with the recent declaration of the climate emergency. 3 forward-looking, very important steps that Council's taken that we just need to work together to continue to move towards. So getting into a couple of recommendations, we've done a consultation process both online and in person at Grandad's Donuts with our community, as well as receiving input from our base of volunteers as well as our board of directors to come up with 5 key suggestions that we think can be effective in moving forward and how we're looking at future projects. So I have the exact writing here. I'm just going to speak specifically to the outcome that we're looking to address. So first is ensuring that the Hamilton Cycling Advisory Committee has every single significant infrastructure project on their plates before the work is tendered, and with enough time to be able to have their voices heard and their input considered in the process. Second is doing the same thing and actually going beyond just the committee. So for large-scale projects like Cannon, where we're affecting the movement of thousands of people, we need to have their voices heard very directly. Third is to prioritize on-route accommodations. Fourth is, where not possible, ensuring that there's a very clearly thought out and communicated alternate route. And lastly, that we're making sure that in every capital budget, we have the funding necessary to provide these accommodations. And additionally, having a small surplus within the capital budget that allows for some flexibility when the accommodations go above and beyond the expected amounts.
Jay, you've reached your time limit. Can you wrap up? How many slides do you have left?
This is my last slide.
Perfect.
And really, so the next steps I think we can see through the recommendations coming out through the capital budgeting process in the future. But I think today a big first step we can do is establishing a clear baseline. So we currently have Appendix C report, as listed here, for the temporary conditions of bike lanes and cycle tracks, but looking to investigate how this can be a more formal document, whether that live in a specific policy, I don't know the details of, but I know that the Hamilton Cycling Advisory Committee is already looking at how they can influence or add their recommendations to this document, and then just ensuring that it's being utilized in the process for every infrastructure project as they arise.
Okay, thank you. You have questions? Councillor Farr.
Thank you for coming. I read your presentation last night and appreciate it. It's well put together, and appreciate the recommendations. And how long have you been in Beasley? How long have you been here?
So I first moved to Hamilton in 2013. I've only been in Beasley since February.
So you came right around the time the Yes We Can, and was it wrapped up by then, or did you come in the midst of that wonderful campaign?
So I came to study originally at McMaster, so I was not involved in the cycling community in 2013, but it would have been right around the same time.
Were you from a community that has great cycling infrastructure and good communication?
I'm actually from a really small town, a farm in Northern Ontario, so it's more about, sides of the roads.
Well, you're in a great neighborhood there, and very engaged. Through you, Chair, we spoke to the Hamilton Cycling Committee at their AGM. I think you were probably there. It was on James Street a couple of months ago, and right around the time where a lot of what you've addressed here, and we don't need to review it, was discussed. And clearly many, not all, but many in the room had, shared the very things you're sharing here today. I can only say I agree with almost all of it. I mean, we do have a cycling staff member who does attend a lot of your meetings, if not all, attends all the Cycle Hamilton meetings, the Cycling Hamilton Cycling Committee meetings, and is a Public Works employee and is aware, but it isn't mandated. It's not his fault. It isn't mandated to give you guys the heads up a year in advance of an RFP for a road work that's a road that has a bike lane on it. So with that, I'm prepared to move a motion that asks our staff at the appropriate time, once the questions are done, to take a look at your recommendations. I don't have an issue with any of them. And report back to this committee on how we may address, hopefully all, but report back to us on the recommendations. So take your presentation seriously, go look at it, and tell us how we may respond and hopefully accommodate those requests. You're going to have other questions from committee members. There's probably going to be cost questions. There's going to be engagement questions. That's fine. But you came at the right time. The only thing is, I have to ask you, through you, are you at least looking forward to what is going to be an extremely enhanced and improved Cannon Street cycle track once this mess is finally cleaned up?
Yes, and yeah, and my apologies for not iterating that beforehand. We are very excited to see that council recognize that Cannon Street, the pilot was a huge success, and are looking forward to the final implementation of the protected infrastructure. So I appreciate that, Councillor Farr, and yeah, look forward to following up and working with staff. I know we've already had a lot of these conversations, as we mentioned. We just want to share that kind of all the different stakeholders are at the table and moving forward together.
Yeah, this is a great 5-minute presentation that formalizes all this, hopefully in the near future, and accommodates that, especially the engagement piece. Just on that too, so you know, a lot of the enhancements that you're going to see when it's finished is the direct result of engagement that happened in many different forms at different AGMs or different conversations with cycling advocates that I had anyway in Ward 2 along the way. So a lot of what we're going to see where, for example, we had really large berths for driveway entrances and exits off the bike lane in some areas. We've reduced that by I think it's close to 25 meters because they don't need to be that long, which means we've now created more protection. The concrete barriers. A lot of these ideas were ideas born of engagement, but again, not as formal as what you're suggesting here. So going forward when construction happens, believe me, more than anybody, I think I would look forward to some sort of formal process that includes your voices and your expertise, frankly, at Cycle Hamilton, the Cycling Committee, and others who are advocates. So truly appreciate the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and at the appropriate time, I'd like to move that motion. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Collins.
Mine's for staff, please. So if you want to keep.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Councillor Pauls.
You said in 3 months there were 75,000 trips. How do you count the trips? Are these people going to work, all 75,000, or is it pleasure? How do you count the trips?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. So the trips are counted based on, through the City of Hamilton has a program to count the trips through the bike lane. I believe the primary counter is at Cannon and Victoria. So we're not able to differentiate specific uses or purposes of the trip, but based on timing, we do see a significant kind of tick up around when you'd expect people to be commuting either to work or school, but there's no way of actually confirming that.
Yeah, because it seems like if it's for pleasure, I would not go to Cannon Street to bike. If it's just for pleasure, I would go in a safer country roads or whatever. But anyways, but if you live there, you know, if you go to work. So what are the riders doing now? Are they taking cars? Are they walking to work? Or what are they doing now? The 75,000 trips.
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question, and something that there isn't the infrastructure or kind of project to take on as of yet. And this is a major concern, and why we're bringing up a lot of these recommendations is that we expect that a lot of these trips, people will end up using alternate modes of transportation. And a lot of times we expect that mean people getting back in their cars and getting on buses. There's a lot of great research being done that while cycling is fantastic for the environment, for personal health, the single key driver which gets people to adopt cycling is convenience. And so when we remove a convenient and safe route, that means that people are going to step back from active transportation. and use different modes that may be more convenient to them.
I would love to find out where these 75 trips people are going. I really would. It'd be interesting to know if they're going to work here, downtown, or where they're going. Because to me, even I'm on the cycling committee, and you know we're together there, and I'm for cycling, but I just can't visualize it. I've been into so many bike events, 75,000 trips in 3 months seems impossible to me. So I would love to see it, line by line. Where are they going? What inconvenience is it to them? Because I have to tell you, I have a lot of residents, even on the mountain, like I don't go to Canada, I live on the mountain, saying that we're stalling cars and they're standing still and because of the roads being narrowed, because of the bike lanes. Those concerns. I'm not against biking. I think biking is a great activity to do. But if I think of it, if I could not take my bike every day to work, the reason is I don't sit in front of a computer. I go out to see my constituents, or I have meetings outside city council. So can you imagine me biking my 10 kilometers now, parking my bike, and then going to a meeting at 1 o'clock somewhere else? I have to get on my bike again, go 10 more kilometers or 20, wherever. It seems impossible to me to do that, unless you have a job that you sit in front of a computer and you don't move around. So I would love to see where people, if we could categorize, if you know the people that are biking, you should know where they're going, what are really the trips, and just really, 75,000 seems a lot in 3 months. If it was a year, maybe, or 2 years, but in 3 months, I just don't see it. So help me out here.
Yeah, so in terms of the numbers, the 75,000 is over 4 months, so it'd be like May, June, July, and August from 2018. And so those are like the accurate numbers published by the City of Hamilton. And in terms of kind of the alternate routes or the impact that it's had on that community of people, we don't have a specific plan in place now, but I'm happy to follow up after and to work with city staff or yourself to kind of devise a strategy where we can kind of reach out to those constituents and see if we can get a better sense of the impact that it's had on them.
Right.
We'd love to be a part of that.
That would be great. And you know what? We have to work together. We cannot say, you can never drive again. You have to go on a bike. And I think that sentiment has been thrown around, that it's a privilege to drive, but it's a must to bike. I had a couple of citizens coming to me really upset, saying, I can't bike now, I'm in my 70s. It seems like there's them against them. So let's work together. Biking is it's great to go to work with a bike if you can. Let's work together and let's figure out what to do and make both sides happy. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Danko. Okay, just re-hit your button then. Councillor Nan, questions? He's has staff questions.
Great, thank you through the chair. Thanks, Jay, for coming in. It's nice to see the presentation come in a formal way so that we can move it as a committee and work with it. I know that it's been quite frustrating for a lot of residents who do use Canon on a daily basis for their commuting. I do know also that Cycle Hamilton's been doing a good job of helping folks figure out what kind of alternative routes people can use in light of the fact that there aren't formal alternative routes that the city was able to plan for and build temporary infrastructure for. So I just want to say from that perspective, I appreciate the work that Cycle Hamilton's been doing. One, to host the dialogue, two, to kind of coalesce the input and the criticisms that have been coming in, warranted because people use this on a daily basis. It's part of their not just active transportation, not just a choice of recreational activity, but a way of life. It's a low-cost, affordable way for people to transport themselves from school to work, to neighbors, and to enjoy a great city. So I appreciate the recommendations and the thought that's gone into presenting them in a way that I think that our staff definitely can work with. So I just wanted to appreciate your time for coming in this morning. Thank you.
Okay, I see nobody else wanting to ask questions, so I'm going to ask for a motion to receive the presentation. Moved by Collins, seconded by Farr. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you for your presentation. We'll go to questions of staff. Councillor Collins.
Thanks. And so I did read, certainly, I think it was late last year, in terms of the criticisms that were leveled at the city in terms of the requests, some of the requests that have been made as it relates to advanced notification, and then certainly some of the operational issues that were included in the presentation, excuse me, and the correspondence that we all received last evening. So I read that with interest. And so I am aware of the fact that we have a committee. We have dedicated staff that actually deal with bike lanes. And so I'm wondering how we end up in a position where the capital budget is set, obviously, months and months prior, sometimes a year or two prior, in terms of the design and all those things that go in well before construction starts. We all know how that process works. We have a 10-year capital budget. You referenced it earlier today under a different issue, Mr. Chairman. So with all that information that builds up, was this a last-minute repaving project, and the consultation that's been requested today couldn't be facilitated? Or I'm trying to understand where the gap is in terms of, we have a cycling committee, we have cycling staff, they meet regularly. Why couldn't some of these issues be addressed?
They're anxious to answer your
Oh,
question.
good. Well, I'm looking forward
ahead.
to the answers.
Through the chair, thank you very much. In this particular situation, the delivery of the project was done through the resurfacing project, and cycling was a add-on to that. So that's one element of things in terms of notification to residents. In terms of the cycling infrastructure itself, it is always a standing item on the agenda for the cycling committee to go over projects in the works and how those things are progressing. In this particular instance, the February, March committee dates with the cycling committee were canceled, so that we couldn't get out in front of this.
It's the cycling committee meetings?
Correct. And we couldn't get out in front of that in terms of communicating to that group.
You
And
know
then,
why they were canceled?
I don't recall. I think I believe the March one was by direction of clerks to cancel it. I think they were unable.
There's lack of quorum?
I don't know the background of that, but I know February 1, the February 1, I don't think there was enough committee members to attend. That is why. That perhaps could have been the situation in March, I just don't recall. And then April was, because it's a turnover of committee members, because the new council, the bulk of their April time was dealt with orientation and that type of thing, so they couldn't really dig into it until the May 1, which was basically.
Maybe partly due to the council cycling in the selection committee picking new members, was that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was extenuating circumstances, and it was not an ideal situation. But we certainly acknowledged, based on the Bay Street example and through this example, that we need to do a better job of getting out in front of this and improving our communications, and that is a priority for us to improve those communications.
Thanks for that. So the 10-year capital budget process is very fluid, so I understand things can change from year to year. How long was Canon in the works in terms of the, was it added to the 2019 budget in the fall of last year, or was this making its way slowly down the list over the course of a number of years?
Through the chair, Councillor, I don't have the exact details, but it wasn't an immediate project. It had been in plan for a number of years. I think, as Steve pointed out, there were cycling elements that were brought forward, I think, I'm going to say about this time last year, and that we amended the schedule and design to make sure that we accommodated all of the permanent features for this track.
Okay. So I mean, I don't, for me, looking at it, I'm not on the committee, but looking at it from the outside, we have a process in place from a capital budget perspective that's very well planned. You can see today what's planned for 2, 3, 4 years ago. I mentioned it's fluid, so some of those things can change from year to year. But you can see for the next 10 years what's planned, and you can start to make accommodation and some plans for whatever changes need to occur. And so I do want to emphasize, we have staff that are dedicated to these issues, and so it's not for the lack of the fact that we have resources. I was here when Councillor McCaddy first introduced the concept of having a dedicated individual for cycling, and then we went into alternative forms of transportation, and we have now multiple staff in these areas, and I don't raise that as a criticism, I'm just raising it as a fact, that we've dedicated resources to ensure that the planning of these projects, in consultation with whether it's roads or other infrastructure improvements, that they can be done in a seamless way. So I take it that there were some maybe some quorum issues or turnover in committee that may have affected this, but it doesn't need to wait until the spring of the calendar year where the construction is going to occur for those discussions to happen. So I would suggest that if there's anything in 220 that's on the horizon that will have some impact on our cycling, there's nothing that prevents the committee or anyone else that's in a neighborhood or a community affected by it to have those discussions today. So those are the points I wanted to make, and I
Very
appreciate
good
the
points.
answers to the
I think
questions.
Councillor Farr's motion will probably attempt to formalize this process. Councillor Danko, questions to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So through you, just wanted to give staff maybe an opportunity to explain how traffic control plans are put together for a project such as this. Is the traffic control plan put together by the contractor and approved by the city, or does the city do the traffic control plan in-house? And maybe to explain some of the challenges of accommodating cyclists and especially pedestrians through a construction zone, because depending on the project, it can be a pretty significant challenge. So just thought I'd give them an opportunity to maybe respond to not just this project in particular, but projects across the city, how we handle the accommodation of different road users.
So through the chair, Councillor, so each project has, obviously we need to follow a process, but they're all site-specific and unique. In this instance, in the Cannon Street instance, we look at the average annual daily traffic, so the volumes moving through. We look at the lane capacity, and in particular during the operations to make sure that, we realize that we're going to be taking a portion of the road allowance away during the construction operations. At that point, we start to make some analysis about what can be actually managed from a capacity perspective. And so some of the challenges, and I think I'm going to use a parallel here, when you have a facility that's singular like the Cannon Street track, and we're doing the same with the Red Hill, sometimes you need to take it offline to work on it and find alternate methods of providing access. So in that instance, there's a fair amount of work being done. We work very closely with operations to understand signal timing and impacts and what needs to be done on the site for that particular project.
Just through my personal experience, oftentimes when you have a road project, cycling and pedestrian access can at times be a bit of an oversight, and the challenges involved make it so that it's a lot easier just to accommodate automobiles. So in this case, I think this is a good learning experience for our staff and for us as counselors to make sure that all road users are accommodated and a little bit more priority to alternative transportation, especially in projects that do have such a well-used alternative transportation infrastructure. On the statistics on the use of the actual cycle track on Cannon Street, I was wondering if staff could maybe give a little bit more oversight onto the traffic counts that were cited, because my understanding is those are actually city traffic counts.
Through the chair, are you referring to the cycling data?
Yes, the like 75,000 trips.
So through the chair, you have to understand that fixed counting location is a fixed counting location, and as any corridor is dynamic, so you could have areas along the corridor there's higher usage than other areas. That particular one really is just to identify activity, and it doesn't really. So at a singular point, who's passing through there. There are other methods that we can investigate into doing follow-up surveys and to get more in-depth and broader data sets from there through follow-ups. But it's kind of just a dumb counter, if you will, just to identify what the volumes are through that period.
Okay. But in terms of the total number, for that specific counter, we're confident that that's accurate?
Through the chair, yes. That ultimately it's 600 cyclists a day on average. So if you work that out over an 8-hour period, it's a little bit less than 100 an hour. Obviously, there is some ebb and flow through there, and there's quite a bit of activity through there, certainly through the peak months of cycling activity.
Do you have a sense of comparatively how that compares to other dedicated cycling infrastructure? Is this a heavily used track versus some of the others, or do you have a sense of that?
Through the chair, certainly from the city's perspective and the other count locations that we have, it's the most popular corridor that we have in the city.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Farr, you can place your motion now.
Yeah, just before I do, on some of the stuff I heard, just two things. First, and both from Steve Malloy, who I love working with on a lot of great initiatives. Most of them have to do with sustainable communities and neighborhoods. He had mentioned that, there was some quorum issues maybe. There was a cancellation by a clerk. Just so everyone is aware, these committees that exist that report or advise council continue to meet in these transition periods between election and once we get things rolling, usually around April. So we shouldn't be in those positions where there's multiple months, consecutive months in these term transitions where these committees aren't meeting. So if there's something we need to work on there as far as the cycling committee is concerned, we can do that as an aside. The other thing Steve said, and I actually disagree with him, was that we could have done a better job. I almost disagree with him on communicating the Bay Street cycle lane. I thought staff did an amazing job on that. We had all ward councillors affected, the mountain councillors too, Ward 8, invited to a town hall that was here. It had to be a couple of hundred people. The consultants were there. It was long before we implemented it. Our partners at the province were very good with their comms, working with our comms, and there was a lot of public input on that, and both the Cycling Committee and Cycle Hamilton, I know, had much to say. So I thought we did a very good job on creating and implementing what is a very well-used north-south track. So that's where I disagree with Steve. My motion is this, seconded by Nan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the latitude that the appropriate staff be requested to review the recommendations and the policies contained in the Cycle Hamilton presentation to the July 10th, 2019 Public Works Committee and report back on how we may accommodate those recommendations contained within.
Okay, there's a little more than the script that I had from the clerk, but I think it says essentially the same thing. The script from the clerk was that refer the presentation to the staff to review and report back to Public Works with recommendations.
Yeah, but
Saying basically the same thing.
Yeah, I want to appreciate with some words that they've taken the time to actually go into Book 7 and show where we did go wrong on the Cannon project, where we potentially went wrong on engagement anyway, specifically. But they've taken the time to do that, so I think we need to take the time in the motion to say, take a look at the policy context pages in this report, and when you report back with this presentation, and when you report back, take those references to policy, actual existing policy on what to do when you construct a road that has a bike lane on it, into account when you report back to us. That's all. And hopefully, I don't see this being a big issue going forward if when that report comes back, we take, as Councillor Collins referenced, our full-time cycling staff member and just make certain that when he attends, as he does regularly, these meetings of Cycle Hamilton and the Hamilton Cycling Committee, he has at each and every meeting advance notice, sometimes years in advance, he could give notice on streets that have bike lanes that are going to be undergoing some construction, major or minor. I don't think this is going to be difficult to fix, and we certainly have learned a lot of lessons through this particular Cannon project. I don't want to speak for Councillor Nan, but we learned, again, the election came, we had a meeting with a whole bunch of people from Public Works. I was very excited about the project and staff, about Cannon being resurfaced, number one. Number two, the enhancements that were going to be as a result of the resurfacing. So, I'm to blame as well. I mean, we asked the right questions. What's the detour route? How can we do the detour route? Daryl Bender from our cycling office was in that meeting and said, this is too tricky. The streets go this way, that way. People are going to be told to go way south, and we'll create that detour. So we asked those questions, but we probably could have pushed a little longer. Had we done that, though, probably would have delayed the project. So there's this yin and yang, and you want to get things done. And
The important thing is you're asking for a motion to report back.
so we have a clear path going forward citywide. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I think I was moved and seconded by Councillor Farr, seconded by Councillor Nan. I have no requested speakers. This is a report back on how we notify the second community. All in favor? That carries. Let's move on to 10.1, which is the neighborhood speed limit reduction implementation. This was tabled at the last meeting, and as approved in the changes to the agenda, Appendix C is attached, which is the mapping that I think Councillor Collins requested at the last meeting. So it's before you as an addenda, as Appendix C. And Councillor Nan, I understand you have a motion that you would like to introduce to amend the recommendation of this report. Do you want to place your motion at this time, and do you have a seconder? Are you seconding it, Councillor Collins?
Thank you. Through the chair, it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Collins to amend the report PW 1958 respecting Bill 65 neighborhood speed limit reduction implementation be amended by adding subsection C as follows. That staff include the Lansdowne neighborhood in Ward 3 with the boundaries of the rail corridor to Main Street East and Wellington Avenue to Birch Avenue, capturing school zones for Kathy Weaver Elementary School and Cathedral Secondary School in Appendix B to report PW 19508. I spoke to this at the last Public Works Committee. It was just a matter of if there's 3 neighborhoods for each one to be considered, or 3 neighborhoods per ward that are integrated into the neighborhood speed limit reduction implementation plan. Ward 3 had 2 neighborhoods, so we were missing a neighborhood there. So this is just a matter of making sure that we've got 3 in Ward 3.
Okay, I have a bunch of speakers requesting to speak to this matter. This is just to the amendment at this time. So, Councillor Jackson.
Just the report.
Okay, I'll let you come back on
Okay.
after we get to the main report. Councillor Pearson to the amendment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to staff, and I appreciate the amendment and certainly the main document. And I apologize because I know I caught for Eastdale, mentioning Eastdale Public School is in the vicinity, but also in the Guernsey neighborhood, Barton Street to Highway number 8, Millen Road to DeWitt Road. There are 2 schools on DeWitt Road, so I'd appreciate it being reflected in the amendment. It's not.
Yeah, are you gone
sorry.
beyond the amendment, have you?
It's the amendment
'Cause we're
that's before
discussing
us.
just the amendment at this time. Yeah,
Oh,
that's,
just hers, sorry. My apologies, I thought it was
right
the
now,
yellow
what's
here.
on the floor
Okay.
is the amendment to,
I'll say it again later then, thank you.
okay. Councillor Danko, is it, you're on the main motion? Councillor Farr, not here. So, and so I see nobody else wishing to speak to the amendment. Have I got that correct? Okay, so to the amendment, all in, well, first of all, I think I should just check in with staff. Edward, are you okay with this motion?
Thank you through the chair to the councillor. I believe we've actually included the Lansdale neighborhood as well in the appendix that was added
It's already in front of us in the mapping.
in the mapping appendix.
Okay, so all in favor of the amendment?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, if I'm hearing correctly, there is an added Appendix C. Edward, could you just
We
confirm?
got that, we've talked
I'm
about
just-
that. What we have now is Councillor Nan's motion to her amendment.
No, I realize that. I'm just trying to understand what Edward said for my own record, for the minutes, that I believe Edward
He
said.
What Edward said was that the Lansdale neighborhood has been included in the mapping, which was part of the Appendix C that was on our blotters this morning as requested by Councillor Collins at the last meeting.
Okay.
Through the
Therefore, we
chair.
don't really need the amendment. Is that what you're saying, Edward?
Oh, we do.
No, we
do, because
do
it's
need the
adding
amendment.
the Lansdale neighborhood. So the amendment stands, and so we just need to vote on that now. If you could just hit the screen for us. Councillor Farr is absent. And that carries. Now we'll go back to the main motion and the speakers list we had on that. I think Councillor Jackson, you were first.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to my colleagues. So I unfortunately was away a couple of weeks ago, and I'm glad this matter actually was deferred to today. And I just want to ask a couple of questions through you to Director Soldo. Edward, this is about neighborhoods that are designated, correct? This isn't about blanketing main arterials across the mountain or the city as 40 kilometers. Mr. Chairman, through you, please.
Edward?
Thank you through the chairman to the councillor. That's correct. The main motion in front of you, the main recommendation identifies to implement citywide neighborhood speed limit reductions on local and minor collector roadways to 40 as outlined in Appendix B. So that is not related to major arterials such as Rimo.
Such as Rimo, Stone Church, et cetera. Okay, I'm very relieved to hear that. I'm pleased with the 3 that are recommended in Ward 6. My staff and I have had a number of requests, and I think there's already some 40-kilometer speed reduction signs in the Lisgar, Eleanor, and Sunning Hill neighborhoods already. So this will, if you will, compact it and make it complete in those neighborhoods, both entering them and the arterial and the local roads inside of the neighborhoods that currently did not have designation as 40. So I'm pleased about that. Also, Mr. Chairman, at the meeting that I missed, the Ward 8 councillor, in concerns about one extra bus stop, raised an interesting point about had transit been consulted with the potential 40-kilometer speed reduction. And all I read in the background on page 3 is Transit Division has been consulted regarding potential impacts to schedules, but no comment. If you read the Hamilton Strategic Road Safety Committee, they're fully in support of it. Other departments have said and made comments of it. So, Mr. Chairman, through you, I need to know if both Transit are in support, or how are we going to, it says staff will monitor the impact of speed reductions on transit schedules. So I'm picking up on a point that the Ward 8 councillor mentioned in having concerns over one additional bus pad at that time. Through you, Mr. Chairman, please, to either Debbie or to Edward.
Bus schedules.
Through the chair to the councillors, I'll start, and there might be some follow-up from Transit here. We did have discussions with Transit related to this initiative, and what you'll see on your mapping is in the dashed lines are transit routes. So depending on the route itself, one of the things we need to do as part of this implementation is to consult with our colleagues in Transit to look at what are the overall impacts potentially to transit travel times through those areas. What we'd like to do is look at it from a larger context and see how much of that delay is actually occurring. And if you refer you back to the report, there may be some locations within those neighborhoods where we may need to keep the signage at 50 if it's going to actually have an impact on transit travel times. So I'll turn it over to Transit if they have any other comments.
Debbie or Jason, do you have any comments on this?
Thank you very much, Edward.
I'm just going to hear from Transit first.
Yep, please.
Through the chair, the only other comment I would make is that in discussions with Edward's group, we did identify that we would look at them on a case-by-case basis and at the individual route level in terms of what allowances we have within the schedule, but certainly recognizing that we are on fixed time envelopes, and if we are going outside or exceeding that envelope, there could be an additional cost. So we did agree to look at them on an individual basis, but in terms of the question, Transit is supportive of it, of the initiative, but with the caveat that we would look at individual routes when those discussions were had.
Thanks, Manager Vanderhyde. So how will we note, will staff report back periodically on the impact potentially on transit routes as we've tried to make better connections across our city, et cetera? I just want to know, is this like, how will we be kept informed, Mr. Chairman, through you to Transit, please?
Jason or Debbie?
So through the chair to the councillor, that would be through ongoing discussions, and as we identify those issues, we could report back here through Public Works if that's council's desire.
Okay, thank you very much. That's so noted, and otherwise I'm supportive of what's here before us. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think Councillor Pearson was next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate certainly the previous comments. So I'm just going to go back to Schedule C. I'm very happy to see this come forward as the grid. So I just want to be sure, and I'm also pleased with the 3 designated areas proposed for Ward 10. But on the, I just want to be sure for staff's information, because one will also affect a transit route, is with the Eastdale neighborhood, I was remiss in mentioning there still is Mountain View School at 299 Barton Street. And this is also on a bus route because that school is still operating until the new Eastdale Public School is constructed. So actually, all the students from Eastdale currently all attend Mountain View, and the Mountain View students. So I just wanted that for the record, and we're anticipating Eastdale to be completed, I'm hoping January 2020, we're hoping. And with regards to the Guernsey neighborhood, this is also on the DeWitt Road, and I forgot to mention there are two schools. I have Orchard Park High School and Our Lady of Peace. So that also affects, and that's not a transit route, but I just want to be sure that staff are aware as they're addressing the signage, et cetera. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I wanted to be sure for the record on this appendix.
Okay. Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, a question on education or consultation. So during the campaign, traffic and speeding were by far the biggest issue that residents consistently brought up. Through our office now, traffic and speeding continue to be probably the biggest concern that consistently is brought up. So once this is implemented, is there an education campaign to go out to the public to make sure that they realize what the intention of these changes are and what the final changeover is going to look like?
Thank you through the chair to the councillor. I'm going to speak about next steps, because the next steps really is to meet with the neighborhoods that we've identified here, roll out a plan in terms of where the signage is going to be. There will be obviously an education component through that facilitation process, but as well, we need to do an education campaign from a more global perspective, working with our colleagues in communications. We'll be coming up with a plan as we get closer towards implementation. This is a multi-year program, and it's going to take a lot of reinforcement of that message as we move forward. So we'll start the initial education from a more global perspective this year, and as every year as we add on more neighborhoods, we'll continue that education.
Appreciate that. That's really good to hear. I had a question for Director Soldo offline, and I'll ask him to repeat the answer here. So the question was why we couldn't just make a citywide blanket speed limit of 40 kilometers an hour and then sign the main streets instead of doing it the other way around, where we're signing the neighborhoods, and it's a much more complicated approach where we're signing each individual neighborhood. But there's a very good explanation for that, so I think it would be important for Director Soldo to expand on that.
Thank you through the chair to the committee. There was some assessment done previously related to a number of different options on how this would actually roll out. So I'm going to give you a bit of a long-winded answer here, but back in 2015, the ministry actually did consult with municipalities throughout Ontario, looking at 4 different options. And those options were maintaining the default at 50, through a legislative change, reducing the speed limit default from 50 to 40. That would apply on all roads. Also through a legislative change, option 3 was permitting municipalities to set a default of 50 or 40 inside municipal boundaries, and requiring the posting of the signs at each entry point into the municipality. And option 4, which is the one they eventually went through, and which what you see before you here today, is a through legislative change, permit municipalities to set different default speed limits inside the boundaries or neighborhoods, and requiring the posted speed limit. And you'll notice in the last one, it doesn't speak to what is the default speed limit, left it very generic. The majority of municipalities actually supported option 4 because it provided them a number of opportunities. It gave us the authority to set default limits under 40 in the future, potentially 30, and also expanding it to this school zone areas which we've identified. It also allows us to maintain existing unposted speed limits on certain roadways. So currently today, you have 50 as the majority of the arterial roads. We don't necessarily need to go out and sign all of them. And it also distinguishes between the local arterial collector roads with respect to speed. Practically speaking, if the default was just dropped to 40 and just put signs at entry points into the municipality, That might work for a very small municipality. But for a large municipality like City of Hamilton, and that's the feedback the ministry got from various municipalities, is very impractical. There are hundreds of local roadways that are at the boundaries of the City of Hamilton. And if we just dropped it to 40, all roads, similar to the question from Councillor Ferguson, would be 40. And we would actually have to sign them the opposite direction. That would entail thousands of signs. And those signs would have to be placed at every single intersection where you're coming off a 40 kilometers zone. So this approach, while it is at a neighborhood level and puts those signs at the entry points, is far more efficient and far more cost effective than the other approach of just dropping the 40. It would literally cost us considerably a lot more money, a lot more signs, and in addition, trying to convey that message to people that, that now once you've come into the city, that it's all 40 would be very difficult. The education would be far, far greater from that perspective. And from an operational perspective, it would be impossible to implement because we can't drop 1,000 signs at once. And there would be this time frame where what is the speed limit? There would be a lot of confusion from that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the detailed explanation, Edward. I think it really helps me to understand, hopefully everyone else, that this is a very well thought out approach. And just on that, just to be clear, that this is a phased approach. These neighborhoods that have been identified are the first phase of the implementation of a speed reduction. And the end goal, is my understanding anyway, is for this to be all neighborhoods citywide, all school zones citywide. Is that accurate?
Through the chairman to the councillor, that is our goal over time, to work at implementing this in across the city. It will take us a number of years, and you'll see in front of you as through the capital budget process, funding to keep this initiative going as we move forward. We also are going to be doing some monitoring to see how this is actually working in terms of dropping the speeds as we move forward, and reporting back to council on its effectiveness as well. There are some municipalities that have started this, like Ottawa and a few others, and what we're trying to do is see how effective it is, and then we'll be hopefully recommending it as we move forward.
Good to hear. Thank you for that, Edward.
Councillor Farr.
Through you, Chair. Just on the implementation, some wards have more residential cut-through traffic than others, obviously. So when we're implementing, are we setting up a schedule that sees those neighborhoods that we all know see more residential cut-through being done first, as opposed to some that maybe don't have that as a major issue?
Thank you to the chair, to the councillor. I think that in terms of criteria of how we're choosing these areas, a lot of it's based on complaints that we've heard. There's the cut-through traffic, as you've indicated, but this is also going hand in hand with the school zones. So we're trying to hit those areas so that we can get the reduced school zones in place as well. As we move forward, we'll utilize that as criteria. The benefit of looking at this as on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis and having that consultation with the local neighborhoods as well is that we can then gain a better understanding of what are some of the other issues, and if this initiative needs to be coupled with potentially utilize some traffic calming in the neighborhoods as well, that will allow us to have that consultation and potentially mirror the implementation of this initiative with some of those others.
Mr. Chair, last meeting too, we anticipate, we had mentioned as a committee, some of us anyway, that some might suggest, well, why not 30? Ed offered that answer then. I think since we're finalizing this now and ratifying Friday, hopefully unanimously, I recall, Edward, you had said at the last Public Works Committee, the province didn't offer that in the criteria from which we could choose from a 30K residential speed limit. Is that correct?
The way that the legislation is written at this point, it leaves it open for the future, but the bill that came out itself refers to 40 kilometers an hour. But the legislation allows us to potentially in the future look at different speed limits, and those are the four options I went through earlier on. While it's now, my understanding is that it's not allowed at this point without potentially signing all the roadways. It does open the venue for, in the future, potentially looking at that.
But it's not an option now.
Through the chair to the councillor, my understanding is that you still need to post 30 on every single street as it currently exists.
Finally, to date, we have, in an ad hoc approach, made some arterials and collectors 40K. In every case, to me, at least I can see in the inner city, they make sense. It started with Councillor Marula on Kenilworth, major petition, answered that petition. Everything's been fine. A Ward 6 councillor who acquiesced and knew that he had to be strong in his defense of the 40K on Kenilworth. A lot of his residents would commute through there. It's been good, but it's been ad hoc. Is there something we can do between now and a few years from now where you as staff and the experts working with you can assess where we can get away from ad hoc and where some of these arterials and collectors that are going to be 50K might make sense to be 40K? I'm thinking BIAs or commercial districts or through the central parts of our downtowns elsewhere. Through you to Edward.
Thank you. Through the chair to the councillor. Thank you for opening the opportunity to speak on this. There is a lot of 40-kilometer-an-hour zones on arterial roads on various parts of the city. We have varying speed limits on arterial roadways, and sometimes it's very confusing to the motorists on what is the speed limit. The default's 50, sometimes it's 40, sometimes it's higher. What I would like to do to take back to staff is for us to come back to council through the Vision Zero initiative and identify all the speed limits, how they're working together. This all does tie back to our traffic signal system and making sure we have progression and coordination. But what we'd like to come back with is more of a formal process for identifying some of these reductions and providing you with some recommendations to consider as we move forward.
Okay. Are you going to do that, or do you need some direction here today to do that?
Through the chairman to the councillor, that is the intent, that we look at that through the Vision Zero initiative.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Vanderbeek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Edward. Some of my questions have been answered, but I would like to talk about the individual sheets that we received this morning. So if you go to Ward 1, which is page 2 of 23, my question is, it indicates that the boundary in that first Ainsley Wood North drawing is Coots Drive. Does that mean that Coots Drive from the town of Dundas limit to Main Street is going to be 40?
Through the chair to the councillor, no, that is the boundary of the neighborhood itself. So the roadways within that boundary is what we're proposing to be 40. We are not addressing Main Street, Coots, in that particular example. I believe there actually already is some reductions along those areas. So it's not the arterials, those are arterial roadways. What we're looking at is the local and the minor collectors within that boundary.
Okay, thank you. That does make me feel better. So likewise, on page 20 of 23, the boundary that's shown in the Morden, Sobel, Creighton East and West, which is the first one at the top of the page, shows the boundary as King Street West and Main Street and Governor's Road. So likewise, it'll just be the streets within that. It won't actually be King Street, Main Street and Governor's Road.
Through the chair to the councillor, the intent again is just to deal with the roadways internal. If there was a desire to deal with those other streets, that would be done through a separate process.
Thank you. And so that leads me to another question. I do have I was waiting for this report because I do have a collector road that the residents along the road would like to have it reduced to 40. Am I going to be able to do that as a separate project?
Through the chair to councillor, our practice to date has been coming through committee, similar to what some of the motions you see here today. But referring back to my previous answer to Councillor Farr, staff will be coming forward, moving longer term of identifying a more global approach. But in interim, if there was a one-off that we need to deal with, we would deal with it working with yourself.
So the
Thank you.
council would have to bring back a motion directly to committee.
Okay, thank you. So through you, Mr. Chair, the reason I'm asking is because for the last few months, we've been asked not to bring those one-offs forward, waiting for this report and the outcome. So I will talk to staff offline about that additional street. I think that's it. Oh, I just wondered if someone could answer me from the time of the report at the last meeting, that was to defer it. It looks to me like the area of, so back to page 20 of 23, the Morden, Sobel, Creighton, East and West, it looks to me like it's being expanded a little. Has it changed, or is it just the way that it was, my understanding from the way that it was articulated in the Appendix B of the original report to Appendix C with the drawings? Can someone tell me whether there's been some additional streets added?
Thank you through the chair to the councillor. I don't believe the area was changed. The descriptions maybe at the last meeting weren't as prescriptive as the maps, and the maps really do provide a great visual of exactly what the areas are.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Pauls.
I want to ask a question to Mr. Soldo, and basically it's your opinion. I know that I've had 3 community meetings, and everybody's asking for speed bumps. They're asking for stop signs. Do you believe that reducing the limit will eliminate those requests, first of all?
Through the chair to councillor, definitely not. This is one tool in the toolbox we have to increase the safety in these neighborhoods. Dropping the speed limit in conjunction with other traffic calming measures are really the best way of going, of addressing some of the concerns you see in neighborhoods. But taking it back to the very beginning, we need to design these roadways in a manner that doesn't necessarily require that we come back later on and traffic calm them and enhance the safety. So it is a multifaceted approach. We need to design the roadways different than we did in the past. And in terms of mitigating them as we move forward, this is one tool in the toolbox to improve the overall roadway safety.
And the next question is, I have an area, I won't tell you the area, but there's been lots of fights because there's a stop sign, and there's a stop sign maybe 500 meters, and they speed between stop signs because they know they have to make up the time because there's going to be another stop sign. So do you think maybe the stop sign should, we should tell our community that stop signs are not really the calming measure that we need every 200 meters or every 100 meters? What's your opinion on that?
Thank you. Through the chair to the councillor, very interesting question. I would say to you that it's recognized from the industry that always stops are not traffic calming. That is the norm across the industry. And if you actually go to a traffic calming guide, it states that right up front. Do not use always stops as traffic calming. Because people get frustrated, and then you're actually seeing exactly what's happening in terms of the speeding between. People accelerate. Now, I would say to you, they don't necessarily go above the speed limit in that area either. What you're hearing is acceleration, so it's perceived speeding. I would say when we go look at a neighborhood by neighborhood basis, we should put in the appropriate traffic calming measure, and looking at the use of PXOs potentially to allow pedestrians to cross. And while always stops are not a traffic calming measure, sometimes they are the right solution though, if you're looking to provide for pedestrian access. You really can't say from a blanket statement, you know, don't do this or that. You have to look at it, the issues that are in each neighborhood, and come up with the right solution, and use the multiple tools that are in our toolbox to provide for greater roadway safety.
And also, if we're going to put 40 kilometers, I guarantee nobody's going to go 40. They might go 45, 46, 48, because the first thing when I get a call is, I'm going to call the police. They're going to stand there. And again, we call the police for that, to stand there, and they're going maybe 40, I mean, now it's 50. They'd be going 53, 54. And so I understand about stop signs, how people want to make up that time. So I've had so many calls, they want stop signs. So how do we inform the public that? The information that stop signs are not the solution, like you said. Is there a sort of a campaign we could do or something? How do we relate that to our residents?
It is all, through the chair to the councillor, it is all about education and identifying, you know, when we get those complaints, you know, as staff, we provide a response related to what's the most appropriate measure that we actually should be used in this area. And it is difficult because sometimes the perception is just drop a stop sign in. And as staff, I can tell you right now, that is not the solution. It is maybe the solution to provide pedestrians across a roadway, but in terms of reducing speeding, it's not. That is recognized from an industry perspective that is an ineffective way of reducing speeding, and then actually you're creating an unsafe expectation from the pedestrian that people are going to stop, and the non-compliance goes up considerably when you put in an unwarranted stop sign.
Okay, and is it the same as speed bumps? They have the same effect?
Through the chair to the councillor, speed bumps actually are a recommended traffic calming because we know they work. There's plenty of evidence out there from our own data at the City of Hamilton, across the country, that when you put in speed bumps, that you're going to get people adhering to the speed limit, whatever it is, but also that there's usually an automatic 4 to 5 km/h reduction in the traveling speed along those roadways. So a lot of work goes into coming up with guidelines for what is a good measure in traffic calming, and it's based on evidence. And really, that's why when we look at each neighborhood, we need to look at the circumstances of each one and come up with the appropriate measure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have no other speakers on the matter, so the recommendation is before you. Do I have a mover and a seconder for it? Moved by Vanderbeek, seconded by Pearson. All in favor, electronic vote. That carries unanimously. Let's move on to 10.2, which is the Mountain Climber Phase 2 pilot results. Anybody want to third it? So moved by Collins, seconded by Jackson. All in favor? That carries unanimously. 10.3, to incorporate city lands into Acadia Drive by bylaw. As approved in the changes to the agenda, please remember that the recommendation B has been corrected to indicate that the bylaw was attached as Appendix B to the report. So is there any discussion to item 10.3? If not, I need a mover and a seconder. You sure can.
At it, who do I ask the question to?
Well, just put your question out, then we'll direct it to the appropriate staff.
Is this road, I know exactly where it is. It's beside the new, where the building's supposed to go for Simona, those towers. It's right beside it? The building, the condos?
Gord, is this your area?
Correct. So through the chair, Councillor, I'm not familiar with what's proposed. It's Acadia Drive as it goes from Upper Sherman over to Acadia.
Yeah, Yes, it looks like it's right because Burbuff is there. It looks like it's near, it's right beside the Simona Homes condominium.
Councilor Pauls, if you're not comfortable with it, just defer it till,
Yeah, can I defer that?
defer it for you, the board councilor, to consult with staff, bring
Yeah.
it back to the next meeting.
Can I do that?
You're moving that?
Yes,
Seconder to that? Seconded by Councilor Collins.
thank you.
So his deferral motion cannot be debated, so all in favor? That carries unanimously. Let's move on to 10.4, which is the transit shelter standardization. Is there any discussions regarding 10.4? Moved by Jackson, seconded by Vanderbeek. All in favor? I think this is an electronic vote because you're spending money on a sole source. Councilor Collins is left. That carries unanimously. Item 10.5 was pulled by staff and will come back to a future meeting. Item 10.6, which is a smart commute. Oop. We just approved 10.4. 10.5 has been pulled, correct? That's okay. 10.6 is a smart commute workplace mobility program and is approved in the changes to the agenda. Please remember that recommendation C has been revised so the report results go back to the Public Works Committee. Is there any discussion respecting item 10.6? Moved by Farr, seconded by Nan. I see no one wishing to speak, so all in favor, electronic vote. That carries. Let's move on to motions. The first one is 11.1, which is Councillor Farr. Please introduce your motion at this time. You got any money left?
Ward
after
2
you
area rating
pay
capital
for all the water
reserve,
main breaks?
30K reserve for sidewalk and road works.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Movement seconded by Councillor Nan. Just, all in favor? We'll move, that carries. We'll move on to 11.2, and Councillor Danko, if you take the chair. So it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Danko that staff be directed to waive the $6,286.33 rental fee for mobile bleachers for the 29 Canadian Little League Championship being held in August at Ward 12, with the cost of work to be absorbed within the Public Works Department operating budget. And that carries unanimously. Let's move on then to 11.3, which is Kenilworth Avenue Christmas Wreath Program. Councillor Collins, I understand you're removing this on behalf of Councillor Marula. Moved by Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Pauls. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor? So 11.4, which is the designation of Paisley Avenue as the Ann Jones Way. Councillor Pearson, please introduce your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm pleased to move this motion on behalf of Councillor Wilson, and it's moved by myself, seconded by the good Councillor Tom Jackson from Ward 6.
With the bright shirt?
He does, absolutely, always. Commemorative design of Paisley Avenue North, designation of Paisley Avenue North, Hamilton as Ann Jones Way, Ward 1. Whereas Ann Jones served Hamilton as an alderman on the Board of Control, whereas Ann Jones was appointed by the province as the first chair of the Regional Municipality of Hamilton Wentworth, and whereas Ann Jones was appointed the first honorary police chief for the Hamilton Police Services. Whereas Ann Jones founded Darts Transit, the first of its kind in Ontario, and she was the founder of the Hamilton Status of Women Committee, for, again, the first in Canada. Whereas she served on the Board of Governors of Mohawk College, the YMCA Board, McMaster University, St. Joseph's Hospital, Hamilton General Hospital, and members of the Zonta Club of Hamilton. And whereas she chaired the Ontario Municipal Employees Retirement Board, served as Vice Chair of GO Transit, and was an executive member of the Board of Governors of Hamilton Region Conservation Authority, and later a member of its foundation. Therefore, be it resolved that the installation costs in the amount of not to exceed $300 be funded from the Ward 1 Area Rating Discretionary Fund 3301909100 to formally dedicate the entire length of Paisley Avenue North Hamilton as Ann Jones Way, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized and directed to execute any required agreements and ancillary documents to formally dedicate the entire length of Paisley Avenue North Hamilton as Ann Jones Way, with such terms and conditions in a form satisfactory to the city solicitor. Very proud to move this, having known Ann Jones myself, and I believe when my parents first moved to the Westdale area, Ann Jones was their councillor, and certainly assisted them. So I appreciate Councillor Wilson bringing this forward, and certainly support today. Thank you.
Councillor Jackson.
Mr. Chairman, I want to commend Councillor Wilson and Councillor Pearson for bringing it forward. Former Regional Chair Ann Jones, in spite of my tenure on council, she was even before my time, before I arrived here at City Hall, and was, I believe, one of the first women elected to that leadership role in terms of appointed as Regional Chair of the former government of Hamilton Wentworth. Currently, to my knowledge, is 99 years old, living at Idlewild Manor on the West Mountain. And some of you may know her very famous daughter, Dr. Liz O'Brien, who runs the cat clinic and is heavily involved with animal welfare across our city and speaks at conferences across the country as well. This is just a wonderful, long overdue recognition. I'm fully supportive. Thank you.
Absolutely well deserved. Okay, all in favor? Okay, we now move into the Councillor Nan part of the meeting. So 11.5 is legal street art. Councillor Nan, please introduce your motion.
Thank you, through the chair. I appreciate the Councillor Nan portion of this meeting. I'm going to reference that again later. So 11.5 is a great opportunity for the city to partner with incredible artists locally and around the country, and helps deal with a nuisance across our city in terms of tagging in some of the graffiti by putting an emphasis towards the street art component and helping create an educational and cultural atmosphere for encouraging people who might be engaging in tagging activity to move towards learning how to do street-based art. So using the same materials as spray paint and those kinds of things, but doing it in a more facilitated way that leads towards actual beautification and placemaking in our city. So I'm proud to move this motion in support with staff and the Clean Green Advisory Committee. So moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Farr. Whereas legal street art walls have been proven to be an effective way to reduce tagging in areas where graffiti is prevalent and provide an opportunity for aspiring muralists to practice their art in safe, creative, and educational space. Whereas Concrete Canvas, a multi-day street festival where local and internationally acclaimed artists alike create murals across Hamilton, and will take place July 10th to the 14th in collaboration with the City of Hamilton. And whereas the north edge of Woodlands Park at Wentworth Street is the proposed location for the installation of a legal graffiti art wall where young local artists can be mentored and inspired by local and internationally acclaimed artists as part of the Concrete Canvas Festival. And whereas the Keep Hamilton Clean and Green Committee expressed support for the project as an initiative to help beautify our community and prevent graffiti, but was unable to approve the motion to fund the project at its June 18th meeting due to lack of quorum, therefore be it resolved, and there's a little edit here, Stephanie, that the contribution of $5,000 be made to the Woodlands Park capital account, referenced 4241809304, for the purpose of creating a legal art wall at Woodlands Park in Ward 3 to be funded from Corporate Financial Operating Budget 211090, and that an additional $2,500 be provided from 2019 Ward 3 Area Rating Discretionary Fund, and that B, that the City's Keep Hamilton Clean and Green Committee be requested to support the street art wall in the amount of $5,000 as part of its mandate to combat graffiti in the city, and that any amount committed by the committee would be used to reimburse the $5,000 contribution to the corporate financial operating budget account that's listed. And we're striking C because we're no longer engaging in transferring the funds to Concrete Canvas. We're keeping the funds within the city and just transferring them from within accounts.
We see that in the motion. Okay, Councillor Farr.
I'm going to ask Ken Coit to just come to the mic. He got all dressed up for us today, and I'm going to use this opportunity to just say a few things. Number one, I'm really happy to second this motion. Number two, as referenced in the motion by Councillor Nan, Concrete Canvas has begun today. It's a 4-day event. In downtown alone, in Ward 2, there's 22 concrete canvas projects happening, and as Councillor Nan mentioned, these artists not only across North America, some of them are coming from different parts of the world. A lot of it is their own time, their own money to get here, their own money for paint. But nobody better than Ken Coyne, since he did get dressed up for us, and he does lead our public art, and he has been working with these folks involved with the Concrete Canvas event to kind of sum it up for us, because we do have some media presence. And I know within 4 days, these folks are transforming places like Woodland, Blank Walls. There's 2 right now just about done in Hess, if anybody wants an idea of what's going on here. These are artists, graffiti artists. And Ken, if you can just sum it up for us, since you did get all dressed up and you're here for this today.
And is there a particular reason why you didn't get dressed up for us today? You can learn from the example of Ken?
Yeah, I rode my bike today. And I don't like when my suit gets all sweaty.
You could learn, but you can have Ken mentor you on this, and at least fix your collar.
Sorry. I'm not at Hamilton Club.
Ken, go ahead.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Farr. This is really a shout out to Scott McDonald and Leon Robinson, who have been leading this project. It's very much their project. We've been assisting in any way we can in terms of educating them on how to work on public property, how a lot of our grant system's working. They're taking full advantage of that. They've got projects across the city. As the councillor said, Scott has got connections around the world. He paints street art festivals around the world. So this is his opportunity to bring this event back to Hamilton, and hopefully we'll make a big change on a lot of private property that has graffiti problems at the moment. We're going to see that replaced with really, really interesting street art.
Okay, so the motion is before you. There's no other speakers. All in favor? And that carries. Councillor Nan again, 11.6.
Thank you. This is in reference to the report that we've just, the item 10.1 neighborhood speed reduction report that we just approved, but focusing on specifically the schools that have land that butt up right against Main Street and King Street. Literally, the property is separated by a sidewalk from these schools to Main Street and King Street. So it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Farr, is the installation of Type B pedestrian crossover on Cannon Street East. Oh, sorry, wrong one.
11.6.
11.6. I know, I apologize, I'm a little confused. There we go.
I thought you were on the right
Flashing
one.
lights, right? Thank you.
11.7 is the drinking fountain.
Continuing, at 40 kilometers per hour school zone speed limit with flashing beacons on King Street East for Bernie Custis Secondary School on Main Street East and Memorial School on King Street East and Main Street East for St. Patrick Catholic Elementary School. So whereas the city has just approved a Vision Zero action plan and the Safe Routes to School Charter, therefore be it resolved that 40K flashers be installed at Bernie Morelli on King Street. Do you need me to read the verbatim motion? No, it's in front of everybody. And then again for the schools that were indicated in the motion. So moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Farr. And the funds will come through Ward 3 reserves.
And Edward, just so, these are arterial roads, so these 40 kilometers lights would flash preschool and after school, is that correct? And which would enforce the 40 kilometer limit?
To the chairman, these are arterial roads.
These are what?
But these are arterial roads, King Street East, but the flashers would only work during the times for the schools, so in AM and PM, similar to the way it operates at other
Right.
locations.
Okay, just want clarity on that. So Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate what your question as well, and to Mr. Soldo. So is the process now for 40K flashing lights to go through a motion? Because I don't recall when I had them installed in Ward 10, or is it because they're on arterial roads? Is that why this is coming by motion?
Through the chair to the councillor, I can't speak to the previous process, but there has to be a process to initiate this, and referring back to my earlier comments, we like to come back to council with an overall plan, but in the meantime, this has been done through this very particular process here. So in the past, I do believe they did go through committee as motions as well.
Okay, I may have forgotten, but I do know that I had 2 sets installed on DeWitt Road, and I don't recall it having to come here. I think it was just staff initiated. This is a number of years ago, so just wondered why it was through motion, but thank you.
Okay, I have no more speakers on this, so put the motion, all in favor. Carries. Councillor Nan, again, 11.7, drinking fountains.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Danko that drinking fountain installation at various parks and public spaces in Ward 3 as part of the Zero Plastic Waste Initiative. Whereas the installation of water fountains and bottle filling stations can help reduce the use of single-use plastic water bottles, have a measured impact on Hamilton's ecosystems and public health. Whereas water fountains and bottle filling stations encourage residents to take advantage of tap water rather than buying bottled water or other beverages. And whereas the water fountains and the bottle filling stations support residents staying hydrated and heat and improve local health, therefore be it resolved that $100,000 be allocated from the Ward 3 Area Rating Reserve account to the following parks and public spaces for installation of drinking fountains as part of the Zero Plastic Waste Initiative at Century Park Street Parkette, which will be under construction this year, North Central Community Park, Woodlands Park, and Lucy Day Park. And that B, the appropriate staff be authorized to choose the best suited location for such drinking fountains based on best practices, and that the annual operating impacts of $2,500 for the supply of water and maintenance and winterization be included to the 2020 Public Works Department base budget, operating budget, and that D, the mayor and the city clerks be authorized and directed to execute any requirements and ancillary documents for the installation of drinking fountains at these locations. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Danko.
Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? And the last one from Councillor Nan. This is the funding for various public infrastructure initiatives. 11.8, Councillor Nan.
Thank you. As the summer of public investment in Ward 3 continues, funding for various public infrastructure initiatives in Ward 3, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Farr. Therefore, be it resolved that funding for the following initiatives be financed from the Ward 3 Area Rating Discretionary Fund be approved, $15,000 to fund the installation of key card entry systems for the first floor washrooms at 30 Sanford Avenue, which is a City Housing Hamilton facility. 2, that $5,000 be funded to have Gage Park Pump Track Shed outfitted with tools and a selection of various sized bikes for community use. This is a great new initiative coming into the park. 3, $1,500 be funded to reinstall Wi-Fi access point on the new Gage Park greenhouse. And that 4, up to $1,600 be funded to install a community memorial bench on the southwest side of Gage Park. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Farr.
Any discussion on it? Seeing none, all in favor?
Stephanie. 12.1.
Okay, we get some relief from Councillor Nan now. We move on to Councillor Jackson. You have a motion for us regarding Valley Park sign beautification. Madam Clerk, can you just do the reset so Councillor Jackson and I can turn them on? Go ahead, Tom.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of Ward 9 Councillor Brad Clark, who's not a member of the committee, he asked me if I would move this. Seconded by Ward 5 Councillor Chad Collins, who has returned to the chamber, that the Valley Park sign beautification upgrades include a landscape gateway welcome sign feature in Valley Park, and whereas the citizens of Ward 9 would like to enhance the gateway welcome sign in Valley Park with additional flower, perennials, and shrubs, that's music to my ears, to be implemented by the horticultural section of the city. Therefore be it resolved, the supply installation be funded at $41.85 from his Ward 9 area rate of reserve, and the Public Works Department be prepared for annual on-base operating budget increase of $1,500 from here on in, and the mayor and city clerk be authorized and directed to execute all documents. Seconded by Councillor Collins. Thank you.
I see no one requesting to speak to the matter, so all in favor? Okay, we now move on to notices of motion. Back to Councillor Nan. You gonna place your notice?
Thank you. It is a notice of motion. I am requesting to waive the rules as it is timely, given that the work is ready to be slated. And approval today would ensure that the work gets done prior to the first inaugural student body coming into Bernie Custis Secondary School. So,
Moving to waive the rules, seconder?
Councillor
Councillor
Collins?
Collins.
Thank you.
All in favor of waiving the rules? Is that electronic vote, Madam Clerk? Okay, Councillor Nan, place your motion now.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Collins, the installation of the ladder-style crosswalks at the intersection of Rosemont Avenue and Barnsdale Avenue, whereas Ward 3 residents have requested the installation of all-way stop control at the intersection of Rosemont and Barnsdale, whereas Transportation Operations Maintenance recommends the installation of all-way stop control at the intersection, and whereas the staff recommend that 2 additional ladder-style markings be installed at the east and west crosswalks at the intersection. Therefore, be it resolved that staff be directed to implement ladder-style crosswalks at the intersection of Rosemont Avenue and Barnsdale Avenue, with installation costs to be funded from the Ward 3 Area Rating Reserve Account 108053 to the upset limit of $1,500.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay, that's it for motions. Let's move on to general information and other business. There's a whole series of changes to the outstanding business list. Any questions or comments on that? If not, I need a mover and a seconder to approve the amendments to the outstanding business list. Moved by Pearson, seconded by Jackson. All in favor? Councillor Nan? And Collins. Okay, that's carried. I need a mover and a second to adjourn. Moved by Danko, seconded by Collins. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you for filling in the